Since 1946, Goodwin's & Sons Markets has been providing you with the freshest produce and finest provisions in our locally owned and operated store. We're now excited to bring you a whole new online shopping experience. Simply visit us at goodwinsmarket.com, where you click it and we pick it. Once you've submitted your items online, our specially trained order pickers will get your order ready for pickup. Then simply park in one of our specially marked online order pickup spaces, conveniently located at the front of the store. We'll load your groceries for you. Save time and order online with goodwinsmarket.com.
I'm Dan Stiff. I'm the senior pastor of Lake Gregory Community Church here. And I wanted you to know that our church is not taking an official position on incorporation one way or the other. We have members and people that are active in our church that are on all sides of the issue. Our position as a leadership team was, hey, if we can help get more information out and help the process so that people can communicate and be able to get the information that they need, then we're happy to do that. So our decision to host today was to try to serve our local community. I went all the way through the book of Proverbs this morning just thinking about what is wise and what is foolish, and one of the things that stood out to me was a statement that said that the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. And it's when we don't give thought to our ways that we don't get the facts, we don't base our decisions on as full a picture as we can get, then we tend to make foolish decisions. And this informational meeting, as I understand it, is all about getting more facts, more information out there, and then there'll be, I'll let the committee, I'm not officially a part of the committee will give you guidance about how they're going to guide this time. But I would like to pray as an invocation here and just ask God for that wisdom. So if you'd like to pray with me. Father, I just want to ask in Jesus' name for a wisdom that is beyond us. When we operate on our own, independently from you, we tend to make very poor decisions. I pray that today will be another deep breath and an opportunity to be able to listen and interact in a way that can lead us as a community to make the very best decisions for this community. So help everyone to just enter in and be able to evaluate and come to their own conclusions, and to feel that this is an atmosphere of freedom here for that process. So thank you for that. Bless this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. And I'd like to add my word of welcome to each of you. I'm Bill Mellinger, the chairman of Incorporate Lake Gregory, and seriously welcome everybody. And that includes those with special posters in the back, and as well as everyone else that is here. Today is a very important time as we try to present the preliminary financial feasibility study for you. So there's a lot of numbers that we're going to be going over today. But today is not the day that we're going to be trying to ask you to speak for it or against it. Whether you're for or against incorporation, we're going to be taking some questions throughout the day. Hopefully you've received an agenda, and you'll see that there are various portions throughout the meeting where we'll pause and invite you to ask questions. And the purpose of those questions is some of us understand numbers faster than other people. And we want to help you try to just see the numbers that Kathy's going to be going through. And so you'll be able to ask questions about that particular section. If you do have questions on other items, Wednesday, April 24th, at San Moritz Lodge, at 7 p.m., That is a community meeting, an opportunity not just to ask questions, but to stand and say why you're opposed or why you're in favor, to give your reasons, to be able to communicate to the community. So, and that's an open meeting that, of course, all are welcome for. That's April 24th, and I was supposed to click the slide, wasn't I? Whoops. Okay, I guess I lost the slide that says it. So there was a slide there that said April 24th, San Moritz Lodge, 7 p.m. You all know where San Moritz Lodge is? There's the slide. Okay, it came back. April 24th, 7 p.m., San Moritz Lodge. And that is a meeting we will probably give about 3 minutes per person so that we get as many people the opportunity to talk. If you, like I said, if you want to say, I want to tell you why I'm opposed, or I want to ask a question, that will be your opportunity to do that. And we encourage you to come back for that meeting. There's also a second meeting exactly like this one that will be taking place this coming Wednesday evening. Now I should tell you, that's not for you to come back and to try to get Kathy to give different information. That's a second meeting for people who can't attend now. We'll be literally doing the exact same thing, walking through the preliminary study, stopping for each item to ask questions as we go through different sections and give people that opportunity. We want them to get up to the same speed that you will be after you've been here today. So that's why 2 meetings. We did not want to miss people who couldn't come. For instance, there's business people who have their shops open today and they can't be here now. So we tried to do a daytime weekend meeting and an evening meeting. And so hopefully you'll enjoy that form. And hopefully if you have questions, you'll feel free. I will tell you this, that when you ask your question, I am going to try to come to you with the microphone if you get your hand up quickly. Or we may just form a line if necessary. But I'm going to try to get the microphone so you can hear what the question is that people are asking.
Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, I want to talk to you about some of the risks. And some of you have been saying, why aren't you talking about everything? Well, because we've been evaluating the biggest risk is the finances. Frankly, the question is if the finances are not there, you don't go into anything else. And so that's been obviously the biggest. But here's some of the risks that are out there. Okay, it's going to come up too fast. Oh well. First is this is a volunteer movement. And that means it could cost up to $100,000 in order to do the full research and study with LAFCO. And that's a concern. It's going to take a lot of people and a lot of involvement, which includes even people signing a petition just to say, LAFCO, we want you to do the study. Secondly, there's no full infrastructure. We don't have all these items in place in our city, in our town right now, do we? However, many of those things technically are in place. So whether it be fire or law enforcement, we're actually going to see that there's going to be people that are working. For example, if you're working for one of the water companies, you'll continue to work for one of the water companies. If you're working for sanitation, you'll continue to work for sanitation. But then there may actually be new jobs that will be added on as we continue to develop as a city. But presently, there's no infrastructure, so we will have to hire, or I should say contract, with third-party providers like San Bernardino County Fire for fire protection, like San Bernardino County Sheriff for law enforcement. Thirdly, there's one of the risks in creating a town is that there can be a lack of experience, obviously. We don't have people here that have been a council member in this town. And so there will be a learning curve and responsibilities that will have to be gained. That lack of experience could be a risk of incorporation. The costs of services, another one, are spread across the county right now. Somebody said, well, what if there's a lawsuit? And right now, if there's a lawsuit in San Bernardino County, it's spread across the county. But there's a downside to that as well. That means that when there's a lawsuit in another portion of the county, we're paying for someone else's lawsuit. That means that there's monies that go off of this mountain, significant funds that go off of this mountain to be resources in other places across San Bernardino County, which is the largest county in the continental United States. By the way, there is one larger, and it's in Alaska. Couple more items, code enforcement. The fact is that some people may not like code enforcement up here. And that could be a challenge because you'll start to create some guidelines and ordinances. Frankly, right now we have ordinances that we have to operate under. They're the ordinances of San Bernardino County. Those ordinances, for example, in the short-term rentals or signage, other items like that, those ordinances monitor, go for the desert, for the urban centers, as well as for our mountain communities. We've keep watching how that happens as decisions are made that have to be made for a broad community. There's one. We have enough government right now. Why would we want to have more government? And that is a risk, that you're adding a layer of government that is local, that is focused on the needs and the concerns of this community, that is an elected representative government that is selected by the people. Where have I heard that? By the people, for the people. Because the situation that we're in right now in the county is that we have 5 supervisors. They are elected by district with responsibilities to their own district, yet those 5 must make decisions across the entire San Bernardino County. And because of that, they're sometimes going to make decisions that we don't like, frankly. I don't know about you, I did not like the brand new fire tax that quadrupled my tax on my property. I would like to be able to vote on something like that and have you have that opportunity as well. Tight finances. The fact is that one of the concerns is that we're going to have tight finances. When you start a city, you've got to be really careful about how you spend your money. It's going to be really important that we monitor and that we get people who are elected who are going to really be, how should I say, most responsible with the spending of funds, and not just say, well, let's just spend for anything we want to spend. So there will be tight finances. Well, some of us are saying, we don't want more change. Change is challenging, isn't it? Change is difficult to go through. And why do we want more change on this mountain? Well, I have to tell you that most of us on the committee are looking at this as an opportunity to preserve some of the great qualities that we have here on the mountain. The beauty of this place, the community feel that we have, the relationships that we have. We like the fact that we can see and know one another, greet people in the post office, have people hold the door for you, even for an old man like me. Some people do that now. But we like the fact that we're a part of community. And so the fact is, though, the sun rises and sets every day, and every day is different. Change is all around us. What we want to do, though, is try to have something that kind of monitors that change, and even has a participation of our community of involvement in that change, rather than having a large county agency tell us how we change our community. And here's one concern: mismanagement and corruption. Well, we've had a supervisor that has been arrested. We've had, there's corruption in various places. How do you make sure that you don't have mismanagement and corruption? For one, it's going to be very important that we hire a very responsible city manager, a person who is going to be careful, prudent, responsible, and wise in how the funds are spent in this community, who really responds to the needs of this community. You can't have, in fact, an example of that is the way the city manager who started in Highland. He held a tight hand to make sure that spending did not get out of hand. Frankly, I don't think we want a bellflower city manager. That's another story. How do you make sure that there's no corruption? How do we make sure there's no corruption today? Well, for one thing, the way you make sure there's no corruption is you elect people that you know, that you believe have integrity and responsibility, and that they're going to speak the truth to you. They're not going to politic you. And that's important as you select people in any kind of role in government. Not like their decisions. Well, the fact is that I don't like decisions that are being made by the federal, the state, the county already. There's already times, and I'm sure that each one of you, and you may be totally on the opposite side of decisions that I don't like, and yet I'm quite certain that there's things that you don't like already. And there will be some decisions that we won't like. But you know what? We will have the opportunity to go up to that person even beforehand and say, I'm concerned about that. We don't have to wait till a meeting to be able to converse with somebody because they're going to be here in our community. And the last one is the one that probably you thought I wasn't going to put up there. It's been, frankly, the biggest question, isn't it? Isn't it going to cost more money to incorporate, to provide the services that we want to provide? Isn't it going to cost a lot more and take a lot more from us? And the bottom line is, I'm just certain it's going to raise our taxes. Well, what Kathy is going to present to you is how we do it by not raising taxes. That we do the things to develop this community, that we incorporate by taking the financial resources that we are already paying, the taxes that we are already paying, shifting them from the county to our town. And that's why we say it's our town, it's our time, and it's our choice. Or to say it a different way, it's your town. It's your time to be able to consider what you want to do with it. And it's your choice. No one else's. It's your choice. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce the lady who has been working with us diligently, who knows financial details about this county that will make your head swim. So it's my privilege to introduce Kathy McDonald, and she will be telling us, there's that slide again. When you want to say your position, you come on April 24th. And now, the preliminary feasibility study analysis. Kathy McDonald, would you please welcome Kathy?
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I don't have to use my mom voice. Okay.
You or me?
So, as Bill said, I've been working with the committee for this since November, to address how they want to look at the possibility of incorporation so that they understand what the process really means. And in this case, what they're doing now begins the process. This isn't where you say, I don't support incorporation, I do support incorporation. What the request is do you support having LAFCO prepare the official comprehensive fiscal analysis that is required by state law, or don't you? Based on the preliminary information that we've done and worked through the county to gather information and all, we have to provide to you a preliminary discussion that says whether or not incorporation is possible. Is it, through preliminary discussion, feasible? And that's what we've been doing. This group has worked hard. They've been working since 2017. And they have looked at the policies and procedures that LAFCO puts in place for an incorporation. And they have very specific policies. They have identified that what financial feasibility means is the ability of a new city to maintain pre-incorporation service levels with sufficient revenues to provide a municipal level law enforcement service consistent with the recommendations of the county sheriff. Sounds simple. However, that's not so simple because no one's defined what is a municipal level of service. They require that you look at the items for only using existing resources, not resources that are subject to determination by a future town council or new special taxes that are not currently in place. It requires that you have 10,000 residents. Seems simple. When I worked for LAFCO, and as many of you know, I worked for LAFCO for 39 years. There have been many places who have just tried to incorporate and could not come up with that 10,000 population. And there are policies and procedures that require reserves. All of those are looked at through this process, and the way we're going to present this information to you is to present it as the spreadsheet that's listed in your handout. Now, you have a spreadsheet that looks like this. I have a spreadsheet that looks like this, so that I can see what the numbers are with my old and aging eyes. So what is the proposal? The proposal is identified to be the reorganization to include incorporation of the town of Lake Gregory, establishment of the Crestline Sanitation District and Crestline Village Water Districts as subsidiary districts, the dissolution of County Service Area 18, Cedar Pines Park, CSA 68, Valley of the Moon, CSA 70 Zone R2, Twin Peaks, R23, Mile High Park, R44, Saw Pit Canyon, detachment from CSA 54, street lighting, and CSA 70, unincorporated area of the county. Rim of the World detachment from Rim of the World Park and Recreation District and San Bernardino County Fire Protection District, its Mountain Service Zone, and Zone FP5. It's quite a mouthful. What does that really mean? You're proposing to incorporate a city. One of the elements that will be discussed in the ballot measure, should you get there, is what the name of that municipality will be. Because you can be a city or a town, but under state law, you are the exact same thing. You are a municipal form of government. So the town, the choice between city or town will be made on the ballot. There will be conditions of approval that talks about different items that will be necessary. One of those is that all the facilities and equipment currently used within the town of Lake Gregory, and I'll just call it that, used to deliver services will be transferred to the town. So the transportation facilities, you will get all the county maintained roads. You will get County Yard 7 for the services to maintain those roads. You will get the facilities and the responsibilities for the districts that are being detached. There will be a ballot measure to choose the name for your municipality. Town of Lake Gregory or Town of Crestline is what I understand the choices will be. And there will be a ballot measure to request a determination to choose whether all future town council members are elected from district or at large. From district means that the area of the town will be divided into 5 districts, more reflective of the communities that make up the town of Lake Gregory. And representatives from those districts must live there within the district they're running for, but they are voted on by the town as a whole. California state law allows for that. That way you get people who are conversant in the special needs of your individual communities, but are still keeping the town as a whole as their primary effort. The population of the town as of September of 2018 is 11,362 persons. They are made up in 4,589 households. There are also 6,295 registered voters that reside within the boundaries proposed for incorporation. As you move forward, in order to initiate this process to left, you must have 25% of the registered voters within that boundary signing the petition to start that process. It's not
He is frozen.
Oh, there we go. It likes you better. So this is the boundary of the proposed town. It is reflective of the community designation that was put together by the Local Agency Formation Commission in 2010. There's been, as I understand it, discussion about what this boundary really means. That boundary was chosen based upon topography, parcel delineations, and the sphere of influence for service providers. It was decided as a means to designate the Crest Forest community, because that's what the community plan was known as in 2010, and the community of Lake Arrowhead. There has to be a dividing line. It has to be reflective of parcels, because LAFCO is responsible for making sure that any proposal only follows along parcel boundaries, does not split parcels, and so that there's a clear delineation. This boundary is very clear on the south, west, and north sides. The east side follows topography and parcel boundaries that reflect the Crestline Sanitation District and the Crestline Water District boundaries. You want to go to the next one? Okay. The most important part is understanding the revenues and expenditures, and we're going to break them up so that if you have questions, you can ask them. This document that I have prepared for the committee is a preliminary feasibility study. It is based on making, as a preliminary, certain assumptions and estimates had to be used. It, as the committee will probably tell you, has been a difficult process to get the information necessary from the various agencies and entities to put this proposal together. And so estimates have been used, and the methodology on how I prepared those is included in the feasibility report. The full report will be available on Incorporate Lake Gregory's website tomorrow, I believe it is.
It's tonight.
Tonight, so that you can see exactly how all of that was done. The estimates that were used were the RSG, or the documents, the data sources that were used was the RSG study from 2015, the County Administrative Office responses on such items as transient occupancy tax, sales tax, the County Transportation Department for the costs for services in providing road maintenance to the county-maintained roads, the Assessor's Office, and others. And LAFCO itself provided some data that was used, such as the population estimate. They provided that back in September of 2015. So all of these were taken into account as I moved forward. One of the things as you look at the information on the spreadsheets that you have in your handout is that there is what is known as a transition year. So the committee is looking towards having an election in November 2020, November 3rd, 2020. And if that election is successful, the town will come to fruition during the month of December of 2020. The county is required by state law to provide for the transition period, which is up to the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that will be from December 2020 to June 30, 2021. There will be a requirement that the new town pay back the county for the cost of service for anything above the revenues that they retain during that process. And then there will be commence the full transitional years, the full years of operation. In this feasibility study, the question about the transitional costs has not been included. There's no information provided by the county for services other than transportation, which is a restricted revenue source. So that will need to be determined as part of the comprehensive fiscal analysis that LAFCO is required to perform. And that requirement is that LAFCO must look at all the services that are currently provided in your community, regardless of their source. So, for instance, the CHP and others that are state operations will have to be looked at. Can you go to the next slide?
Are you going to go through?
Oh, on the other one, they popped up individually, sorry.
Yeah, they're not doing that now.
Okay, all right.
I can try again, but no, they're not.
Okay. For property tax, there are three major sources of revenues that this incorporation will receive should it go forward. Property tax is one major source. The others are transient occupancy tax, sales tax, and the revenues from the agencies that are being dissolved, detached, or in the case of Crestline Sanitation and Crestline Village Water District, the share of their revenues for administration that will be transferred to the town. Property tax is the method for preparation of that, and I believe you have that. You do. In your handout, there's a sheet that looks like this. You want to take a look at that. State law requires that the information use the total net cost of services that are to be transferred to the new town from the county be determined from the last fiscal year for which audits can be provided. This is the actual cost of that, not the budgeted cost, not what's projected to be spent, but what was actually spent. So in the case of this preliminary feasibility study, the costs that are being used are from 2017-18. And as you'll see on the information, the costs for land use administration, planning, code enforcement, building and safety, land development, and fire hazard abatement were taken from the county's net cost shown in its budget for 18-19, because it shows the actual net cost for 17-18. We've used a methodology to come up with a per capita cost by taking the population of the unincorporated area, that is the area that the county is responsible for providing these services, and divided those costs to come up with a per capita cost. The actual population of the unincorporated county is defined by the Department of Finance for 18-19 is 311,659. That's all the residents of the unincorporated area. The 2.2 million, that is the total county population, the balance of that, all live in cities. These services are therefore provided by their local city. So we've come up with that cost. Public Works did provide us with a response as to what the cost for 17-18 was. Animal control and law enforcement, the current cost for providing that service was not provided by the county. So what we've used in that case is the RSG study population for those costs, divided it, came up with a per capita, and assigned a value for those services. So that the total cost for the county to perform those services in 17-18 is estimated to be $3.9 million. Law requires that the auditor's ratio of property tax to all revenues for the unincorporated area be used. And I will, at this point, tell you that the RSG study was wrong. The RSG study used 11.7748%. However, in doing the background research to get the public record data for the RSG study, we found the letter from the auditor controller to LAFCO that said that the ratio was 62.31%. That is a significant difference. If you look at the RSG study, you'll note that it has a footnote that says that that information was provided by the County of San Bernardino. I was the executive officer of LAFCO at the time, as we provided the liaison for preparing that study. Do I have an explanation? No, I don't. I have reached out to RSG, but they have not responded. I don't know, or I can't tell you now, whether the information it was at LAFCO, because there is a copy of it, which you'll be able to see on the website, that it was delivered in March of 2015. So maybe it's kismet, because in all probability, if that study had used the 62.31%, we would probably all be talking about incorporating Rim of the World, and you would be considered West Lake Arrowhead, because it would have been for all the area, and it would have been feasible given that percentage. The difference in using that on this allocation was significant. It was roughly $1.7 million. And I will be honest with you. Absent that discovery, I would not be here presenting this information other than to tell you you weren't feasible. You did not have the resources coming to you pursuant to law to evaluate this. But as the sheet shows you, applying that 62.31% from 2015, it comes to a base year property tax of $2.4 million. Now, in order to bring it forward to the first full year of operation, where you would get that, we applied a factor of 6%. Now, your valuations and other key indicators show a greater increase than that. But we're going to stick with 6%. So that the first adjusted first year property tax revenue for the new town is $2.6 million. That is roughly 21.83% of the property tax revenues available. These estimates the estimates for the costs have been provided to the county, but to date, we've not received a response back in support or correction or the rest of it. However, this is a preliminary feasibility study. LAFCO has the obligation, and the county has the responsibility to provide LAFCO with all of this information. State law requires it. So that is your first major indicator. The next is sales tax. Sales tax was far easier. Sales tax came from the county administrative office, who has a consultant that prepares that information. So your sales tax is identified as being around $331,000 per year. Next up would be transient occupancy tax. This is the tax, 7% tax, that the county currently has for short-term rentals, motel rooms, Airbnb, all of those types of things. That information has been provided. That information has been, there is information in the materials that show how that was calculated, what the crestline information is, and it also shows that there is one Twin Peaks property that is included in the proposal, whose transient occupancy tax would become a part of this. And so then we have included the revenues that are attributable to your community. Fees, charges, business licenses, etc. The fees and charges we took the estimates from the RSG study. The business license fees is a new ability. The county has a very limited range of business license fees. The new town would have a much broader, I estimate, business license fees, and we've used the model from the city of Highland. There are multiple models across the board in the various cities in the county. Some of them are very, very aggressive. Others are more about just making sure inspections are done and the rest. Highland is a fairly middle of the road, and we thought it was an appropriate model for your use. The property tax rates of the dissolving districts, that being CSA 18, CSA 68, the detachment from CSA 54, those kinds of general ad valorem revenues will be transferred to the town to perform those services. CSA 18 and 68 and the R districts, R2, R23, and R44, have restricted revenues for transportation, and those must be used for only that purpose. Those are shown in the materials in a separate section. The subsidiary districts, and for the dissolving and or detaching districts. In the case of County Fire and Rim of the World, Park and Recreation District, County Fire receives a general ad valorem share. That's part of your 1% that shows up on your tax bill. It's not divided, you can't see what that share is, but they do receive a share that they acquired from the Crest Forest Fire Protection District. They also have the new special tax for FP5. That special tax will be transitioning to the town in order to provide for the level of service that they have requested. Rim of the World Park and Rec doesn't cover the entirety of the incorporation, but its $22 special tax will also be transitioning to the town for its use solely for park and recreation purposes. The subsidiary districts, Crestline Village and Crestline Sanitation District, they will remain as special districts. The only change in their governance structure is that the board of directors, which is currently elected for both agencies, will become the town council. The town council will sit in that capacity to review all the items related to their operations, such as their annual budget, their annual audit. They would take the separate actions for charges for service and the use of their reserves. But the reserves and fund balance of those agencies will remain with those agencies. They have been developed using the charges and fees for service for delivery of water or the taking of your wastewater and treating it. They cannot be used for anything else. And it will be the obligation of the new town council to maintain those. So that's in general those revenues. I will like to say that there are miscellaneous funds that are shown. The transfer in from Crestline Sanitation and Crestline Village are shown on that information, and that is to perform the administrative functions. So now that's my general review of revenues. Are there any questions?
So like we said, what we're wanting you to do is ask questions about revenues at this point in time. And I forgot. Does everybody know Raymond Ray? So Ray is here. He is actually putting this out on the internet. So even if you miss, or when you leave here, you can still see it. By the way, Ray, there has been some question in the past as to whether we shut you off. You are going to keep running the camera, right?
The difficulty is that in these particular meetings, when you're doing the question and answer session at the end, there's different stations where the questions are being asked and answered, and I can't cover all of them, and there's a lot of room noise, so nobody can hear anything anyways, which is the reason I've stopped those broadcasts at the end. Nobody's told me to stop them, I just stopped them because nobody can hear anything because the whole room's chatter talking. But as you do the question and answer sessions, we'll make sure that's broadcast for the public.
All right, good. So you can actually maybe catch people right now, and hopefully the mic will help you.
I'm actually going to follow you.
Oh, okay. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Go ahead, because I have to have my thanks. Just what question?
So I'm going to exercise my article or Bill of Rights #1, freedom of speech. So I'm going to put out my public opinion.
That is, you're welcome to do that, but the public opinion time is on Wednesday the 24th. We're right now trying to do revenue questions.
You're violating my Bill of
Hi,
Rights.
my name is Greg Bluefield. Question, you used the term CS a number of times. Can you explain what CS means?
It's county service area. A county service area is a special district formed by the Board of Supervisors to perform services within a specific area. For instance, CSA, or County Service Area 68, was created for road improvements and snow removal in Valley of the Moon to augment the level of service that the county provided. So rather than saying county service area every time, I just abbreviated to CSA. But the Board of Supervisors governs that.
And so the number of service area that you mentioned, number this, number that, are those listed in your breakdown or on the
Yes.
lakeregular.org?
Yes, they are listed on the materials as far as their revenues, and then also in the expenditures, they're shown. The restricted revenues for road and snow removal are restricted there in the bottom section. The general operation, general ad valorem, non-restricted, is in the top portion of revenues.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, so her.
Thank you. I've noticed that in the forecast that there is a general 2% across the board from the implementation for an increase in revenue, but yet in the property tax share transfer, the growth rate adjustment was 6%. Could you explain the difference and where those numbers were derived from? Because as we all know that as a real estate broker in town, I don't necessarily see a consistent increase for long term necessarily based on our economics.
The choice in that regard for the 6% was taking the information that we had from 17-18 and the audits for those information and applying a factor to get them to the transitional year or the first full year of operation. Transitional year is a portion of 2021, 17-18, so that is the increase. We just applied that. And then the 2%, the philosophy taken in this was to be very conservative on revenues and liberal on expenses. 2% is the statutory maximum increase in property taxes that can occur. So we've simply applied that across the board for the revenue increases from one fiscal year to the next.
As a maximum, that doesn't seem to be conservative in my opinion.
Sorry.
Well, the property tax goes up. The assessed valuation changes based on sales. The property transfers going back to their levels. A number of different things. And rather than trying to calculate all of that, we simply said that and used the 2%, which is what Prop 13 said that they can increase by the maximum. And in all probability, it will be much higher than that.
Are there any state grant funds included in subsequent years for those revenues?
There are no grant funds utilized in projections because grant funds are not considered continuing. Because you apply for a grant, you may get the grant, you have maintenance and operation obligations for the grant, but they are not considered to be sustainable forms. So yes, I would hope your town has a very experienced grant writer, but in projecting whether or not you are sustainable, and that is the real question. Can you incorporate and can there be a statement that you are sustainable? We did not use those.
I'm looking at page 21 here, and it's got proposed boundaries on here. And I looked at something similar to this about approximately 7 years ago when the boundaries included Lake Arrowhead and the like. It's shrunk nicely, I would say, and I'm for incorporation, but
We're not allowed to talk about whether we're for it or not, sir.
oh, sorry. We won't talk about it then. But didn't LAFCO do a study, an investigation, of this back then?
In 2015, the second supervisorial district, Supervisor Rutherford, contracted with LAFCO to perform a preliminary feasibility study. And that was for the Rim of the World Incorporation. And the original discussion in that report went from Crestline, like Arrowhead, Running Springs, Arrowhead Park, clear across. And then there was a deviation where then it was shrunk to just Lake Arrowhead and Crestline. And when I make the reference on the property tax issue, from that study used 11.7% as the ratio when it should have been 62.31. And that study from RSG, their findings were that it was not feasible. And now there was a report from LAFCO that was provided in October of 2015. When that report was given to LAFCO, it was given to the County Board of Supervisors. There was a meeting at Rim of the World High School to go over that, where my presentation as the executive officer at the time was that there was no community for RSG to work with, to ask questions about how they wanted services to be provided, what level of services. So that preliminary was kind of built in that kind of vacuum. But given that, and my conclusion was that it was possible. I said it was possible at that time, based upon how the services were to be. And that's...
Before I return, is there somebody else that had a question?
There's a lady up here.
Right here.
And these are questions about revenue.
This is part of your presentation. You were saying that 25% of the registered voters will have to agree for the process to go forward to LAFCO, excuse me. And I know that a decision was made to use registered voters as opposed to property owners. And I'm curious what the rationale for that was. And then I'm also curious how the people who own property here but are not full-time residents will be involved in this process.
We'd love to try to deal with that kind of question, but right now we need to get through the finances on here, and we're trying to go through the preliminary study.
I could do it real quickly.
Yeah, I know.
I could do it real quickly. State law requires that for an incorporation, it's either 25% of the registered voters or 25% of the landowners representing 25% of the land value. The simplest means to circulate that petition is registered voter. And so it will be 25% of the registered voters who will, if they're valid, start the process. Registered voters will ultimately decide whether or not it is formed, because at the ballot it will be the registered voters, those who reside here, who will make the ultimate decision whether or not to incorporate.
A community like this has no representation.
More than 50% of the parcels are occupied here. In Lake Arrowhead, it's about 30%. So,
Again, if you can try to keep your questions to revenue, because we have more financial information that she has to go through.
I actually have a revenue question. It has to do with, in January 30th at the meeting, we weren't told about the auditor's ratio discrepancy, and I was wondering if that discrepancy is reflected in this current budget right here. I don't see, I mean, to me, I'm looking at expenditures and revenues, and I don't see a significant change.
the property tax, if you look on the spreadsheets that show, you will see that the first year revenues for property tax are 2653717, right? Very top line in the revenues, that property tax. So when the form that I went through that has the auditor's ratio establishes the base property tax. In the forecast, the first year transitional, that's $1.2 million, is half that. The next year, it's increased by 2% to 2.653717.
Okay, and how does that reflect in terms of our expenditures?
We'll get to the expenditures now.
Well, I mean, as far as maybe the increase in the amount that we have compared to what was in January 30th budget. I mean, what's the difference in terms of...
January 30th?
Yeah, January 30th. There was a budget that was presented to us, in my understanding.
Actually, we haven't presented any budget yet. This is the first we've presented any kind of financials.
Yes, I was wondering how you determined the property taxes. Did you go by a boundary and then look at the addresses on that boundary to come up with the revenue inside of your box or boundary?
It was utilized by tax rate areas, the full value of tax rate areas, and those were taken from the RSG study. That was the information. The county auditor controller provides what those revenues are based on that tax rate area. So that's what we use.
Okay.
After I moved up here a few years later, I got a notice from the county that my property tax is going to go up just a little bit. I called down there to find out what the procedure was, and the county told me they have the option to raise your property tax up to 3% every year. Is it my understanding that if we go to this cityhood, that the property tax will automatically go up to 6% the first year?
You're talking about your property value?
No, tax.
There is no change to the property taxes that you pay. What we're talking about in looking at these is based on the property tax that is paid, what will go from that general ad valorem tax to the new city. This does not have an effect on your assessed valuation. It does not have an effect on how the tax collector applies those taxes on your tax bill. The assessed valuation increase is set out by state law and the Constitution. So there will be no change to your tax bill based on those. This is a reallocation of those existing revenues to the town for the services that it assumes.
I have a question about page 8, your property tax here transfer. You show code enforcement at the county right now at $3.5 million, but you say Crestline is going to pay $128. Did you include the court time of that code enforcement?
This is the total net cost that the county applied in its 2018-19 budget for 17-18, the actual.
Yes.
The net county cost for code enforcement was listed as the $3.5 million. And I applied that population to come up with a per capita, and that's for cost. And so that then translates into the property tax calculation. I don't have, as I've tried to explain, there has not been provided to the committee the actual cost for the community of Lake Gregory in order to prepare this. These are estimates based on what we believe are very valid methodologies. But once this proposal is, if you choose, to sign the petition and submit it to LAFCO, the county will be obligated to determine and provide the exact cost for providing those services in the town of Lake Gregory.
What happens to our revenue when property tax values go down because similar things that happen in a recession every 10 years or so? How are we going to be protected with that cushion of not having that revenue?
We'll get to it in a moment, but that's why there has to be a reasonable reserve. The LAFCO policies require a reasonable reserve, and I will explain how that calculation is included in this as well.
My question's related. I was going to ask a similar question about recessions, which are predictable roughly every 13 years. But I also wondered if it's in my imagination, or is the residency becoming more permanent and less second home in the area? If anybody knows that answer, it would affect tax base or failure on property ownership, meaning taxation.
there may be others in the audience who may be able to answer your question outside of this discussion. But I will say that the permanent population of the town of Lake Gregory has been increasing, the percentage of permanent population. You are at about 50% permanent population to household, or to units, whereas in Lake Arrowhead it's about 30. So that's another difference.
I just want to know why my freedom of speech is being violated, and I will not accept the answer of it's not allowed.
Right on.
The next meeting.
Thank you for this report. Part of the question that comes about is there's some services that extend beyond the Crest Forest area. For example, Room of the World and the street lighting, some of them go a little. But this study and the discussion is really between Grandview as the Twin Peaks boundary, going south through Cedar Pines Park, and all the revenues are adjusted for just those questions, sir. That's just clarifying. All the revenue that you're pulling is only the revenue that is drawn from that specific area. Is that correct?
These were estimated as revenues solely from within the boundaries that are proposed for incorporation. Yes, CSA 54 goes across the boundary line into Twin Peaks. Rim of the World Park and Recreation District is much larger, including Rim Forest, Lake Arrowhead, Running Springs, Green Valley Lake. So that is, the estimate is only for the revenues generated within the town of Lake Gregory to be transferred to the town for its support services.
I think we're going to need to go on to expenditures, because there's several more items than for us to continue to look at.
Okay. There are certain policies that LAFCO has related to expenditures that are requirements for developing these projections for what it will, the estimate for cost. One of those is that the salaries that are proposed for the new town of Lake Gregory must be the average of comparable sized cities by population, and that is in Riverside and San Bernardino County. That is the policy of LAFCO. In developing this, we used what were the comparable cities by population. Those are Adelanto, Big Bear Lake, and Grand Terrace in San Bernardino County, and Canyon Lake and Calamasa in Riverside County. However, because of the unique nature of the town of Lake Gregory being an alpine city, we have expanded those projections to look at using alpine cities like Mammoth Lakes, Shasta Lake, Placerville, Anderson, and Chilhowee. In the materials that were handed out, we have provided the comparison of the salaries for the city manager, city clerk, director of administration, or finance director. We've put together a whole chart that looks at that, and those were used in developing the overall discussion about salaries to be paid for future town of Lake Gregory employees. This is the structure that was agreed to by the committee for the organization of the town of Lake Gregory. There is the town council who chooses the town manager. Town manager is an appointed position, not an elected position, and he serves at the discretion of the town council. The city attorney is by contract and serves at the pleasure of the town council. There are three primary divisions proposed, one of which is the administrative services, which is the town clerk and treasurer of finance, public works, which would have the road division and the public utilities, and community development, which would be planning, building and safety, code enforcement, and park and recreation. The committee's direction to me in looking at these was that contracts for service, rather than assuming a large number of employees, would be used where there is the potential for ebb and flow of operations such as land use development, code enforcement, those types of services, or for high-cost services such as law enforcement and fire protection. I will say that the committee asked about the possibility of creating your own police force and your own fire department. And if that were the case, I would be up here telling you that you are not feasible, because they are highly expensive and the risk is extreme for workers' compensation and other factors. So this, the expenditure projection uses contracts for multiple levels of service, but this is also coupled with the understanding that this administration will need to be very lean during the early years as it develops its own policies, procedures, and philosophy. As Bill alluded to, the city of Highland was recommended for denial by the LAFCO staff, saying that it was not feasible. Part of that is because it was in the same general arena as you are. That it was very lean, there were not vast amounts of money. Incorporation isn't supposed to be about gathering vast amounts of money for services in the community. But there's no way to legislate that you hire someone who will keep within the projections and make sure that your operation is as efficient and effective as possible. They did. They are a resounding success. They have the philosophy of pay as you go. They take and they save money, and then they implement the services and or provide the infrastructure that their residents want. But they do not go into great debt, and they have worked very, very well. So we've done the salary comparisons. There are two types of revenues, or expenditures, discretionary and restricted. The discretionary are the, such as the town manager, administrative services, and those. The restricted are the fire protection for the response for the property tax, the special tax, and the road subventions and revenues are restricted to be used only for that purpose. So in looking at these, we have gone through the city council. The projection is that the city council can be paid no more than $300 per meeting of the city council. That is a maximum set out by state law for cities up to a population of 35,000. Above that, it changes the per meeting charge that is available. But this projection does not pay for any other benefits for those council members. There is a provision of state law that says that they can receive the same benefits that full-time regular employees receive. And it is clear in the materials, if you go to the website and read it, that is not included. There are some minor expenses associated with the city council, and the projection that in the full year of operation there are no more than 16 meetings per year. The city administration is the city manager. It is projected for the highest paid and benefit person based on the comparison of salaries that were in the review. It includes the payment for an election. You will pay for elections every 2 years. The law specifies that the two lowest vote getters will be up for election in 2 years. And having your election in 2020, you would be on odd or even numbered years, which is when the general elections are held, so that is the best time as far as cost goes for having an election. City attorney is contract. Administrative services provides for assumption of the customer service accounting clerks from the subsidiary districts in the first full year of operation. It also includes an allocation for hiring professionals to review and make sure that you receive the transient occupancy tax you are due, that you receive the sales tax revenues that you are due, that it pays for the annual audit that is required in your comprehensive fiscal report every year. And it pays for other associated costs in operating the finance division. Community services is identified as land use planning, code enforcement, and the rest. You'll notice that this has an allocation of $700,000 for the first 4 years and then drops down to $500,000. A newly incorporated city is required by law to prepare and adopt a general plan, housing element, and as a part of that, an environmental impact report. Included in this projection over those 4 years is the cost of $800,000 to do that. It is possible that the community can hire a consultant, given the fact that there's limited areas of privately owned properties for the potential of development. But nonetheless, you have to have a general plan, and it has to have 6 primary elements in it, including the housing element. So we have, in fact, put together a projection for that. Public Works is for the management of the restricted road functions, as well as the operations and management of the subsidiary districts. We have included the cost for a law enforcement contract. There was a number of discussions with the county sheriff's office. The county sheriff originally gave us the Ferrari and Cadillac options or models for service, and you couldn't afford those. What is included in here is what I call the Accord Sport Level. It provides for a 24/7 2-deputy patrol. It includes traffic, 2 deputies to perform traffic control during the day. It includes all the other costs for those operations, such as detectives, sergeants, the lieutenant. It is the desire of the sheriff and the hope of the committee that a substation for the law enforcement officers be a part of the location of the new town hall, so that the community has a place and a resource to work with that. And that is their desire. Substations and local policing are what the county sheriff would look to. And for fire protection, we have included a projection to have 3-man crews on the fire engines at station, we're going to get these numbers reversed, 26.
Half of 26.
Half of 26. I knew I was going to do that. Pay for half the cost of a 3-man crew at Station 26 in Twin Peaks, and the full cost at Station 25, along with the administrative costs, contract costs, hazardous waste disposal, and the rest. These costs were based off the study that was done for the annexation of the city of Hesperia's fire protection district into county fire, which was completed in November of 2018. Animal control is a contract that the town will need to enter into. We have used the RSG study on a per capita basis to arrive at that. We've also included non-departmental type costs such as rent, utilities, streetlights, association dues, etc. in each of the years, and arrived at the total expenditures, general fund expenditures in the first full year of operation at 11.927%.
It's now time for you to ask questions about expenditures, and as you notice, there's going to be some other things coming that relate to expenditures.
I noticed nothing was mentioned about pension benefits like CalPERS. Is there going to be any CalPERS pension benefits associated with any of this?
For The contract costs, no. But for the regular employees, the benefits do include a projection of what the general cost for those pensions would be. The question will be and need to be answered by the town, whether they choose to go with CalPERS or they choose to go with SB-SARA. The subsidiary districts currently that are proposed to be assumed here have general employee contracts for retirement purposes. So that's unknown. These people.
Okay. So there is some tension. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why a lot of cities are going under right now.
And many of the reasons for that have to do with law enforcement and fire protection.
True.
Because those pension unfunded liability are about 90% of payroll for those functions. That is another reason we're using the contract cost for county services through the County Fire Protection District or law enforcement. You pay what their cost is. And that's included in their contract.
So are we going to be cutting back on the number of fire departments and the number of
law
enforcement?
Actually, in law enforcement, you will be getting more coverage than you have now. Currently, through the county sheriff for Crestline, Lake Arrowhead, Rim Forest, and Running Springs, you have 3 deputies on 24/7. In this proposal, the model that is proposed, the town of Lake Gregory would have 2 full-time deputies 24/7. So that's an increase in level of service. As far as fire, 2 patrol vehicles, yes. And currently you have 3 patrol vehicles for the entire area from Running Springs west to Crystal.
And Green Valley Lake.
I had heard that as a town of Lake Gregory that the town potentially wanted to control and take over the management of the lake. Is that in this proposal as to what that
I'm sorry, Virginia, that's actually a different question. We will try to address that, but that's not expenditure. It's not in the expenditures.
No, there is no.
We have not negotiated anything with the lake, but incorporation allows finally you to have an elected body if the community wanted to take over the lake, but it's not included here.
But Park and Recreation, there is an employee in the community, the Public Works Division that is designated as Park and Recreation to develop services for the community locally. There are revenues coming from Room of the World here, and those revenues will support that position and hopefully some of the others.
Pardon, a point of information, you mentioned that there are a choice of 2 names. I understood there's going to be an election. Is it 2 names or is it still an open election for the name? I know it's out of order, but it's a point of information.
That's out of order.
She's saying it as if it's in order.
Well, the choice can only be one of 2, because there has to be one has to be chosen. So by the time it gets to the local agency formation commission, there will be a choice of 2.
That's clear.
As a rule, in the Crestline subdivisions, we do not have homeowners associations. I did hear that you had something in there, or there are going to be homeowners associations imposed, therefore increasing revenue from that sector.
Homeowners associations are private, and they have no bearing on the government structure. A homeowners association typically is put in place at the time a subdivision is approved, and I believe you do have several within the Crestline area. Those are unaffected because they are designed to meet the conditions of approval and provide those services. Some of them could be for private roads. Some of them could be for streetlights within the subdivision. Those things are unaffected by this proposal, and nor can they be required as a part of its formation.
One more question. When you are trying to negotiate for the contracts for these services, fire and police, those can go through the roof. Are you going to have any safeguards in there that say it can't go, the contracts can't go up a certain percent because CalPERS is going through the roof?
Yeah.
And you are negotiating that in your contracts.
The only CalPERS entity currently is through the Crestline Village Water District. And it will remain a separate entity whose board of directors will be the town. And it will be their responsibility to address those issues with CalPERS. SB Sarah serves the county operations that are being assumed. Those of the people who perform those services are members of SB Sarah, as is the Crestline Sanitation District. SB Sarah, the county had a pension obligation bond that it floated a number of years ago, which will be paid for in 2 years. So the rates charged for those retirement systems will go down. The choice of what retirement system to be used remains with the town. We're not dictating what they should choose.
Yeah, I'm just saying, your contract negotiations, there could be some really big jumps, is what I'm trying to explain.
And the town council would be obligated to review the revenues that it has available for that service and what that contract can be. And the model given from law enforcement provided those costs based on 1920 that they're currently developing for their budget for 1920.
2020.
That's
That's even before.
Can I clarify something I thought I just heard you say? Did you say Crestline Village Water will be retaining their board?
No.
Oh.
I noticed in a couple of references, you are referencing RGB study, but in the forecasting and in other pages, it's referencing an ROW study.
Rim of the World.
Rim of the World. So
that's the RSG study.
That is the RSG study. Okay, so just want to make sure for clarification for everybody that's reading this. And on the sales tax, the sales tax figures that you're currently using and the forecast for future years, is that actually being used at the current rate and not anticipation of any increases?
There's no increase. That is at the current rate, and it's based upon the allocation that the county said would be generated, the sales tax revenues generated within the boundaries of the town of Lake Gregory. That does not anticipate any change.
One more revenue question? Excuse me, expenditure question.
Yes. Hi, my question is regards to the salaries of the city managers and the clerk and the public works director. I'm wondering why, the reason that it's based on the population versus the property values, because you're comparing us with cities like Mammoth Lakes and Tehachapi, and the average salary is $205, and you have ours as $213 as an example of the city manager. I'm just wondering how you...
Because the LAFCO policy says for comparable cities by population.
Okay.
And so that's what we use that as. And so the choices for the Alpine cities were the ones that were the closest in size to the town of Lake Gregory.
We need to have you now present about reserves and contingency funds.
Yes. LAFCO requires that there be reserves in place for the establishment of a newly incorporated city. Their policy statement regarding reserves, and I'll read it to you. In determining compliance with Government Code Section 56720, which is that the state requires that there be a reasonable reserve, is a contingency fund equal to 10% of the projected general and special funds of the new city. The RSG study that was done projected a 10% reserve and a 25% contingency. That has not been used in this proposal. What is shown on the current forecast are reserves. Let's see, let me get here. Establishing the reserves, let's see. The original reserve is set at 500,000, and when combined with the fund balance, you will exceed the 10%. But based on current sources of revenues and current projections for expenditures, you cannot come up with the full 10% of reserves for the first 2 years of incorporation. After that, you do meet that requirement in the third year, where you will have a 10% reserve and you will have a full reserve or contingency. I don't know what's happened for the proposal. I dropped these in my car and I've gotten them all confused. Yes. What that projection states is that there will be 500,000 the first year for reserve, 500,000 for the second year, and meeting your reserve of $1.2 million in the third year. But you will also have a fund balance or contingency in those years of 1.4 in the beginning year, 1.3 in the following year. Now, I want to speak to one effort or one discussion point in this review. We are obligated to look at 1718. At the present time, AB 818 is currently in process in the state legislature, and it is intended to return to incorporating cities, those cities incorporating after 2012, the property tax in lieu of motor vehicle fees. Those discretionary revenues were removed in 2011 by SB 89 as a means for the state to deal with the repercussions of the recession. And what does the return of that means? A significant change in the potential for reserves and or augmented services. We prepared the preliminary feasibility without them because it's speculative. We won't know for certain until September of this year whether or not that legislation is passed. If it is passed, the projection identifies that you would have a potential increase in the first year of almost 900,000. That was developed using a $52 per capita calculation. That is the calculation that was in place at the time, in 2011, when SB 89 took that money away. I will say that in 2017, when a very similar, almost, well, exact same language was proposed for by the state legislature, for Riverside County, because it was for the 4 cities that had lost that revenue source the day that they incorporated for 2 of them, what that would mean. And in their case, it was $66.87. However, in my projection, I've used the almost 900,000, but if the 6687 were the number to be used in the calculation, it's about $1.2 million. I would hope that, regardless of your opinion on this, you would support the passage of AB 818, because those discretionary revenues are key to any community that would seek to incorporate. And so if that revenue is returned, your reserves would meet the 10% plus a 12% contingency fund the first full year of operation.
So, questions and answers about contingency funds, Steve? And we are getting down to near the end of the presentation. I lost where I'm going.
You said that the reserves have to be met. What if the reserves aren't met?
This is for the evaluation by LAFCO. And so if the current situation were to hold, and AB 818 was not passed and signed by the governor, as part of the proposal, you would ask the commission to consider that you would have a contingency and a reserve combined that would meet their 10%, not a reserve plus a contingency separately. That's their decision.
And what if neither one of those were met?
What if neither one is met?
Then they won't approve it. Because that's what I mean when I say that this starts a process, because LAFCO has a responsibility. Their responsibility is to make sure that any entity that they form, they can make a statement that it will be sustainable. And that's why there's the state law requires a 3-year projection. LAFCO policy requires a 5-year projection. And a 5-year projection for state government is the best that you can do. Beyond that, it's just pure speculation.
Hi. Concerning the cycle of recessions that I mentioned before, and given the 2007 to 2009 recession and the 13-year common cycle roughly, we're approaching in a year or two another recession. Has there been any consideration to the viability of finances when that happens?
Since a recession is speculative and when it could occur next year, which would dramatically affect the abilities.
Has it been considered? Was my
That's
question.
what the reserves are intended to smooth those, and that the town council would then be obligated to live within its means.
It's something I just really wanted to ask. Those salaries, did they ever consider possibly looking at the median income in the community that these people are serving and possibly come up with a more realistic salary base?
That would be the subject of the town council when it actually hires employees. But in looking at a preliminary feasibility study that's to be used to circulate a petition to be filed with LAFCO, LAFCO's policies are that you use that. That's not to say that the town council couldn't find someone for less money and that would be able to perform those services, but that's unknown. So we are obligated to look at and comply with those policies, and that's why the salary projections were provided.
There is one other aspect to that too, Kathy. Kathy has really worked to underestimate revenues and overestimate costs.
You mentioned that Highland was not recommended for development as a city by LAFCO. How did they get there?
The process requires that there be a staff report prepared, and the LAFCO staff recommended denial. And the community of Highland and its representatives came and convinced the commission that they could make it with the projections that they provided. Now, understand that the process has changed since Highland Incorporated and Big Bear Lake Incorporated, and even Yucca Valley in '92. So the process is a little more complex than it was then. The comprehensive fiscal analysis prepared by LAFCO was not required. All that was required then was the report, much as I've given the committee, to be given to LAFCO to be considered by the commission. So, sorry. Revenue neutrality. The law does require that in an incorporation, the cost of service and the revenues should be equal. If they are not, revenue neutrality requires that there be a payment back to the county to smooth out those kinds of losses. In the case of Mammoth Lakes, when Mammoth Lakes Incorporated, the county of Mono almost went under. The majority of its revenues came from the town of Mammoth Lakes and the ski resorts there. When Citrus Heights incorporated in Sacramento, it took a huge sales tax generator away from the county of Sacramento. So the response to that was this revenue neutrality calculation. We've used that revenue neutrality calculation, and we've identified that based on the costs for service that were included in the property tax calculation and the revenues that were generated, the county actually comes out ahead by about $90,000. So there's no payment going to be required to the county for the transition of service. The next slide talks about the restricted transportation funds. As part of any incorporation, county-maintained roads and county local drainage systems are required to be transferred to the new town. The revenues that support that are restricted in that they are state subventions for the development of roads and maintenance and snow removal and the like. You can go to the next slide. In the materials that are presented here to you, we've identified the transportation funds, and this is a map. It's really hard to see.
Really hard.
Maybe if you can go online. There are yellow lines that identify, and you can't see them.
It is online, but yes, it's too hard to see.
Yeah. Those are the only county-maintained roads within your community. Many of the roads are public but non-county maintained. Those roads include the roads in CSA 68, CSA 18, R2, 23, and 44. We've identified the subvention rates from materials from the League of California Cities and used the calculation of the city of Big Bear Lake, since it's roughly 1/2 the population, and these are population-based revenue sources, and identified those in those projections. We've identified also that since 3.2% of the road miles, county-maintained road miles, will be coming to the new town, that 3.2% of the county's transportation reserve should come to the new town for future use to maintain your roads, upgrade your roads, resurface, and the like. And on this material, that's identified as $1.8 million. The cost for contracts for service, be they through the county transportation department or other local contractors to take care of the roads, we've identified based on the county's cost for 17-18 what those costs would be on an annual basis. They are roughly in the range of $900,000, topping out in the final year at $1 million. Those would be administered by the Public Works Department through these restricted resources. And as identified, there needs to be a reserve in these types of funds. And we have identified based on that, that the fund balance would be in the first full year of operation $2.4 million, which well exceeds the requirement for a 10% reserve. In addition, the county service areas that are being dissolved and their responsibilities and special taxes and or general taxes for transportation services only are going to the new town. Those revenue sources are identified on this sheet. It identifies what the county cost for maintaining those roads in that area. And for CSA 68, those of you who may live there, the current increase in special tax that took effect this year, and as well as the contract to upgrade the roads in CSA 68 will be completed by the time this proposal is in here. So we have not included the repayment cost for that contract because it's our assumption that it will be completed. But if not, then the revenues would need to accommodate that. And we have established the fund balance that would come from those county service areas in the transition year. and also have established more than a 10% reserve for those funds as well. So we have addressed all of those requirements for the restricted funds as well as the general discretionary funds. For the subsidiary districts, we have identified that the subsidiary districts will pay into the town the costs for administration. But on balance, the rest of the revenues and resources and operations will remain with those districts. And we have established a forecast for that is included in the back pages that identify Crestline Sanitation as well as Crestline Village. And what we've identified is that the transfer of those costs is less than the current costs, so that the reserves or fund balance will continue to increase. We took out the audit materials for depreciation. Depreciation isn't an actual expense. It's an auditing requirement for the use of facilities and the lifespan of those facilities. But we've included those numbers are in the fund balance. And those will be unaffected. As you can see, the revenues and resources will remain. In the case of the Crestline Sanitation District, the forecast for the most part was taken from the adopted budget for this year. They project out a number of years. And Crestline Village, the forecast used the average of the audited years. And I want to reiterate that we have used audits because those are the actual expenditures for all the agencies that we've discussed. So there will be no detrimental effect to those districts, not from a financial perspective. And so in conclusion, my conclusion is, given those parameters, the incorporation is feasible. You have revenues that will be going to the new town, sufficient to cover the expenditures for service, and the service will be increased. But that's a decision ultimately to be made by the petition signers as to whether or not you go forward. But my calculation is that you will be feasible. I thank you very much.
Kathy will be here, the committee is here. If I can have them stand up really quickly. Steve Garcia is coming back down the hallway. Wave, Steve. John Short is over here. Wave, John. Okay. Penny Shubnell is clear up here at the front. Mike Johnstone, it's spring break. Mike Johnstone's on a family vacation, so Mike's not here. But what do we think? By the way, we have had some people who had posters back here, and one of the biggest things that I saw on it says, no, we don't want new taxes. I can't quite read it now, but we don't want any taxes, and we don't either. And that's the point of why we've done this feasibility study. And you see, we have tried to be realistic, really look at the numbers, and as a committee, we believe that it's feasible and that we shouldn't. And we're not wanting there to be. I don't want to increase taxes. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this, is because we want to have a say in whether taxes go up, not just have them risen for or against us. With that, Kristen, would you please come? Oh, there she is. This is Kristen Daniels. She is a member of the Chamber of Commerce. She is working as one of the now 25 volunteers that are participating with Incorporate Lake Gregory. Kristen.
Thank you. All right, you're going to roll the slides for me, right? So my husband and I live in Crestline. We actually live in DOE, and we absolutely love this community. It's really actually what we've always dreamed of. We love the mountains, we love the nature. We don't want any of that to change. We want to see our community thrive though. And I see a lot of struggling. So, I'm with the chamber, so, I do talk to a lot of businesses. I do see businesses struggling. I do see things where having a local advocate would be huge for us and would really propel us forward as a community and help us to thrive. So I wanted to show that I believe want to know if this is what's right for our community. So to me, they're saying, yes, please keep doing the work. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you to the group, the committee that is doing the work to find out if this is actually feasible for our community. And then it goes on to LAFCO, and then LAFCO tells us, yeah, it's gonna work, or no, it's not gonna work. I want that answer. So I want it to get to that point. And in order for us to get to that point, we have to sign that petition. And the petition says, will you tell us if this is what's right for our community? Will you get the numbers together? And that's really all everybody's asking for, is just to get that petition signed. It also costs money to do this study. These are all volunteers. So it's gonna cost money. So if you wanna go on the website and donate, $5 or $100 or, whatever you have. And if you don't have money, donate your time. Just reach out to the committee and let them know what you can do to help. So next slide is just a reminder of what the next meeting is. We're going to be doing a coffee and conversation. It was a great idea on another community member's part. She's actually in this room, who really loves our community. She said, let's do coffee with the committee and ask them questions one-on-one, really get your concerns out, and get your questions answered. So that's April 13th, 10 a.m. Next slide. And then April 24th is the Q&A, but I don't want to forget about Wednesday night. It's at 7, right? Wednesday night is the next meeting. If you guys missed any information, if you want to invite anybody else to hear the same exact information, she's going to do the same presentation, bless her heart. That's on Wednesday at 7 p.m. here at Lake Gregory Community Church. But the April 24th one, the Chamber of Commerce is going to host a Q&A so that more questions can come out, more concerns can be addressed, because it's important. I didn't hear you.
Will somebody from the local agency information commission?
This committee?
Yes.
Yes, they'll be there to answer the questions.
To answer questions?
Yes.
And they're not going to be regulated in certain questions?
It's a Q&A, that's all I know actually. So she's asking if the questions will be regulated on the 24th.
We're going to have some time limits to it, but it's not just question and answer. If somebody wants to speak for or against incorporation, that will be the opportunity for that.
All right, so that's April 24th at Tamarind Lodge, and then the other information there. Join the movement. So you guys heard what I said. I'm just like you. I moved here. I said, how can I help? I just started volunteering. I volunteer for a lot of things, just kind of one of those things that I love to do. So you guys are more than welcome to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, reach out to this committee, and honestly, the movement is like, let's help our community thrive. That's what I'm all about. So, thank you.
The church is already set up for worship. And so, I'm sorry, no more. The church is already set up for worship. And so if you would please make sure you pick up anything around you. Try not to mess up the chairs too much as we leave. We will continue questions on Wednesday night, and then the 24th is the big opportunity for conversation. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, everybody, there you have it. Today's meeting was just an analysis of the feasibility. This was not a decision to incorporate or not. It was just a matter of, is it feasible and are they able to move to the next step? And that was LAFCO presenting their information and their data to see if this is actually feasible. And the word is that it is feasible, that without raising any taxes, they will actually be able to incorporate. But there's another step that goes forward. Look back at the live video and check our website. We'll have the information on the next meetings that are happening. It's me, Raymond Ray with MountainReporter.com. Nothing else being cut off. I want everybody to see everybody's leaving. They're going out the door. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you later.